Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Gensler, I'd like to continue our discussion about SOB 121 staff bulletin from the SEC that would potentially have significant effects on the ability of banks to custody digital assets. Let's briefly begin by following up on something that was raised the last time you were in front of this committee. You previously said that prior to the issuance of SOB 121, your staff did not confer with any of the prudential regulators. Is that correct?
You'd have the transcript, but I think that our staffs do talk to the prudential
prior to
regulators.
the issuance of SOB 121, did your staff confer with any of the prudential regulators?
With regard to that particular
Correct.
staff bulletin, I don't recall that they did. I know that they have.
So let's let the record reflect that the SEC staff did not think to confer with prudential regulators before issuing the staff accounting bulletin. In response to my question for the record from April on this topic, you stated, quote, SOB 121 provides non-binding staff guidance on the application of existing accounting and disclosure requirements under U.S. GAAP. Prior to the issuance of SOB 121, Mr. Chair, did FOSB issue anything related to the custody of digital assets, and if so, what was issued?
I'd have to get back to you, but if you're asking about the Financial Accounting Standards Board, I don't know that they had done something on custody, but we could get back to you.
Since you cited the generally accepted accounting principles in your response, I decided I'd take a look at this myself. Prior to SOB 121's issuance, FOSB had not published anything related to the custody of digital assets. In fact, the board added accounting standards for digital assets to its agenda in May of 2022, 2 months after the issuance of SOB 121. Your response to my question, for the record, from April, also indicated that SOB 121 provides guidance on the application of existing accounting and disclosure requirements under the SEC rules. So here's a question. Prior to the issuance of SOB 121, what rules had the SEC finalized relating to the safeguarding of digital assets?
Well, we have on the books a rule from 2009 that applies to the custody of digital assets by investment advisors because it covers all funds and securities. That rule's on the books. We also had finalized something around special purpose broker-dealers, which relates to crypto broker-dealers.
So I took a look at this topic myself. The answer, quite frankly, is none. There were no SEC rules on the books that directly address the topic of custody of digital assets. As you know well, the SEC issued a proposed rulemaking on custody, including digital asset custody, in February of 2023, and that rule has not been finalized to this day. So to recap, the SEC failed to confer with prudential regulators despite the fact that anything changing rules around the custody of assets for banks, regardless of whether the bank is publicly traded, would be of obvious consequence to them. Then, when justifying the bulletin, the SEC cited the GAAP and SEC rulings. However, at the time when the bulletin was issued, there was no action by FOSB, no rulemaking from the SEC on this topic. In April, you said you wanted the SEC to, quote, stay in our lane, end quote, with regard to SOB 121's potential effects on a bank's balance sheet. It's fair to say that the fact pattern we have is that the SEC is not just going out of its lane, but it failed to comprehend the existence of any conflict with prudential rules. Additionally, the SEC's justification for issuing the bulletin is based on accounting guidelines that did not exist when the bulletin was issued and rulemaking that was not even started until nearly a year after the bulletin was issued. It's pretty obvious that one of two things happened, and both are bad. On one hand, it's possible that the SEC was well aware that there was no strong justification for issuing the bulletin and chose to do it anyway. That would show a pretty straightforward case of regulating by guidance and unsubstantiated theory. On the other hand, the SEC made some obvious basic mistakes in the issuance of this bulletin. In light of these mistakes, it's worth mentioning the SEC Inspector General's report on management and performance challenges. Among other things, the report indicated that very high attrition has required the SEC to rely on detailees with little or no experience to contribute to the core regulatory tasks such as rulemaking. The case of Saab 121 raises the question of whether the SEC is compromised. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.